Nobody likes a fake.
It's actually kind of the crux of it. Do you care?
There's more expectations on women than there are on men. What do you think about that? And do you think it's fair? Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel. On our channel, we talk about everything that has to do with developing femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I'm Cherry Lynn, and I'm here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So today we're talking about sugar-coated truths. Is being polite a pretty little lie? We were asked recently about this topic, and we thought it would be a really great time to discuss why it's important to be polite, and how do you balance being polite without being fake, but also being authentic and real and true to yourself. Do you want to read the question that was sent to us about this that sparked this conversation?
How can I balance honesty and authenticity in my social interactions while still being polite and respectful? I sometimes feel like these two conflict. I've been told that I can come across as too blunt, abrasive, or outspoken. I want to stay true to myself, but I also want to build stronger and more meaningful friendships. How can I express myself honestly without pushing people away? Have you ever been around people who are just, you can tell they're not sincere? They're just fake, so we call it sugarcoating it, versus being blunt or rude.
Yeah, and I like what she said in there about, I want to be true to myself, but I also really care about my friendships, and I care about building relationships around me. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but at the same time, she wants to speak her mind. One of the things I think is interesting about looking at the history, etiquette, and politeness is that it kind of started out as kind of a, I don't want to say like a snobby thing, but it kind of was part of the caste system. It was part of this hierarchy, and people that were at the top of the hierarchy were really polite, and it kind of evolves. But then when we get into the 20th century, it starts to become more of a social, wouldn't you say, like more of a social thing? That's where it, which is what we kind of have in modern day.
If you've ever seen Emily Post's book of etiquette, it's quite thick.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rules, some of which I've never heard of. I mean, rules for responding to invitations and phone conversations and just all kinds of things you may not even think of. But the hope, at least my thought, is the hope for those things is so that you are always gracious with people and don't offend wherever you can, because you don't want to hurt people. That is the goal, is to not hurt people or offend people.
I know a lot of people that look at Emily Post and they kind of roll their eyes at it and they think it's snobby.
Yeah.
I think that's what is interesting about this conversation is we don't really, when we talk about politeness, we're not talking about snobbery. I think what's really interesting about the snobbery piece is that it's not a main goal of being polite. The main goal of being polite throughout the beginning is about respect and kindness. And I think when we started to get into the caste system part of politeness, that was where it became snobbery. And I think this is what part of this topic is. Feminine women are obviously, we don't want to encourage anybody to be snobby. There's that politeness that's respectful. And I think what's interesting about the Emily Post part, and then the early 20th century into today, manners, etiquette, politeness, is that women are really interested in it.
Well, women until, the feminist movement kind of started getting in the way of everything, there were charm schools. They actually did have charm schools, and women would go to them at parties to learn charm, which also includes manners. And you wanted to be thought of as well-bred and ladylike. And I was thinking, I think that even what we call the lower classes of system of people had their own versions of etiquette, but they weren't as public. They had their own things like that, but there was a lot more rules with like so that because the idea is to not offend and to develop relationships. There's the only point to etiquette and all that is for relationships and also better business. It's good business too.
Right. And I think that's the key. And I don't know why particularly women are so interested in it, aside from what you just mentioned, that it's about relationship building, and women
we tend to be relationship oriented.
Yeah. And men, are a little bit more task focused, just a tiny bit more.
I think more sensitive. Yeah.
I think men can be relationship focused when it comes to business. That's when it kind of like turns on, or when it comes to maybe like their marriage, they're a little bit more motivated, or they're dating. But in general, women are a lot more aware of relationships. We notice more things than men do in general. And I think that's why women have this long lasting fascination with politeness, etiquette. Now, on the flip side of that, in today's society, it's kind of almost being rebelled against.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's women out there that love it and are obsessed with it. But then there's also women that roll their eyes at it and say it's snobby. So the first part of why it's important to be polite is the social part of it. Manners help people interact smoothly. It reduces conflict. It's just overall socially a win-win. The second part of it is the professional part, which we already kind of touched on. Workplace success often hinges on social skills, including diplomacy. If you want to advance in the workplace, men or women, you have to understand that you need to know how to turn it on. You need to know how to be polite. And it's great to be direct. It's great to be confident with what you say, but there's a fine line between being abrasive and being direct. The third one is cultural norms. Being polite is often associated with morality, kindness, and emotional intelligence. And I think that's a really, really big part of this in today's society, is that when you meet somebody and they're polite, but not fake polite, how does that change how you view that person?
If you feel like they generally are interested in you or care about what you say, that goes a long way in relationships.
Absolutely. So much that I think even con artists, they memorize these things, they practice these things because they recognize how valuable of a person it makes you when you know how to say the right things and be polite. It can almost transform you, understanding manners.
Yeah.
The last one is the influence of media and education. Politeness is taught in schools and reinforced through literature, media, and parenting.
Politeness it's tend to be taught in schools, but the politeness that was taught in schools to my children is basically the same stuff that I taught at home, the general stuff.
But I think too, with the parenting part of this, or just the influence of your culture, I guess is what we're really talking about here, is understanding that the boundaries of other people. I think that's something that you can't really read in Emily Post, right? It's like the bar has been raised so many times when it comes to do's and don'ts, I guess. Like from when you were a kid, for example, there wasn't social media.
No.
We as parents now have to figure out the etiquette around social media. And it's tricky because it's not something that you can, like I said, you can just look up in a book. You have to kind of navigate that. And that requires a lot of emotional intelligence. Women have it a little harder. There's more expectations on women than there are on men. What do you think about that? And do you think it's fair?
I think it depends what the expectations are on. I think we've to some degree, we've kind of set ourselves up in the 21st century and some of the 20th century. We basically announced to the world we can do it all. And feminism has done that. It's done some good things, but we kind of set ourselves up for we can do anything. And I hear women say, who needs men? We don't need them. If we're going to do that, it's going to be really hard to do it all. We kind of expect men to be more insensitive. So we get that all the time. But when women are, it just really is a bad fit. I've heard women in politics complain and say, hey, when I'm really assertive and outspoken, I'm called the B word or I'm called aggressive, whereas a man does the same thing. He's just really assertive and he's a real go-getter. And
I think the reason why we wanted to bring this up is that it actually doesn't really matter whether you're a man or a woman being polite as long as your intent is in the right place. The first thing I think of as an example is The Devil Wears Prada, that movie. If you've seen that movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. The woman in that movie, the big boss lady in that movie, she is very difficult, very abrasive, very blunt. When you're listening to her that her intent is not to be kind, not to be respectful. She is on purpose not being polite, not being respectful. And yes, she of course is given the label that we're talking about. If a man were to do that, he probably wouldn't get the same label as her. But honestly,
he wouldn't be liked, but he wouldn't get the same label.
The same label. And I think, it is unfortunate that women have to go under that. It is unfortunate that we have to be that way. But honestly, it's not something I feel like we can control.
No.
We can only do our best. As women, I can only do my best. You can only do yours. I don't know how we would ever change that about society. But what I do think you can change is your intent. And if you as a woman are being labeled all these terrible things because you're assertive, there's a few things you can tweak, which we're going to get into, these 5 things. But you also have to think about your intent. Are you trying to be respectful? Are you trying, when you're being blunt or you're being bossy or what all these things that we're kind of like where our minds are going. Are you truly considering the feelings and happiness of the relationships around you and the people around you?
Ultimately, to me, and you use The Devil Wears Prada, it's a really good example. She didn't really care what anybody thought about her, about what she said about people. She seemed to think of people as disposable. One of her problems is she didn't have to treat people politely who didn't do anything for her that she needed. Mm-hmm. She didn't need them. If you look at people as all valuable, that you're not above somebody, even if you have a position that has more power, if you don't use that to be kind of a tyrant like she was, mm-hmm. You can actually get more productivity out of people.
Well, and some people might say, well, she demands respect and that's how she does it. Yes, you're right. She was successful. She did demand respect. But we're talking about politeness and femininity. And I disagree with that theme that in order to be powerful and influential, you have to be the way she was. I think deep down, the character, and I know who it's written about, really does care about people. She just doesn't know how to do business while caring about people. And I think you can learn to do both. And I have worked for leaders that are strong women that can do both. I've seen it. So I know it can happen. You just have to recognize it and develop it.
Well, there's a difference between an alpha woman and an alpha tyrant. I mean, they're not, right. We need alpha women. We need beta women. We need all kinds of women. But just because you're an alpha doesn't mean you have to be a tyrant. And actually being tyrannical ultimately undermines you in the end, because if people are afraid of you, you're not going to get as much out of them.
Right.
Well, love is a greater motivator than fear.
I think it depends on the situation. Everybody's so different, but generally speaking, I think that you can do both. And it's not just, this isn't just about the workplace. I know I use The Devil Wears Prada as an example, and that's a workplace example, but this has to do with everything in your life. And you mentioned alphas. An alpha woman that's a stay-at-home mom, that's probably the person that wrote into us. I don't even know. Maybe not. Maybe she would. But it could be that she's a stay-at-home mom, or she could be a housewife. Who knows? And she's struggling with her social bluntness and lack of manners and politeness. So we're going to talk a little bit about ways that you can approach politeness while being true to yourself and not being fake, because nobody likes a fake. Let's just be honest. I can't stand it. I know you can't stand it, but we also like politeness. So where's the balance between being polite and being fake?
If someone is being fake, but they're being polite, you suspect they don't feel that way. So right. You're actually not getting authentic. You're getting, they're just being not a good actress and being phony. And so what do they really think? And that you can't get real out of them.
Right. We're going to teach you the 5 ways that you can do this without being fake. There's actually a way you can practice this and develop it so that it is genuine and real, and you can get really good at this. You just have to change your mindset. The first one is your foundation. What are your rules? What can you realistically do? Make a list of do's and don'ts for yourself for conversations. And this can be workplace or personal. So an example of do's and don'ts is I do not talk about politics with others. Like I'm going to write it down. I'm not going to do this. I just
unless you know you're of the same mind, and then that's fine.
Well, even then, if the person is really struggling and they get triggered by politics, just don't talk about it unless it's your family or something.
Right.
Or maybe not your family.
Actually, maybe Uncle Joe, yes, and Aunt Sarah, no.
Right. You just have a list of do's and don'ts. Another example that can be on your do and don't list for conversations is I do try to carefully change the subject if I feel triggered. Give yourself a backup. If you know that when you're in this group of ladies or whoever, and you get into conversations and you know that this one tends to trigger you about this topic or that, just say to yourself, ooh, I need to try to politely change the topic. One thing that really helps me is I always have a fill in the blank kind of question that I want to get the answer from everyone I'm around. So this past week, I went to an event, spring break's coming up. So I said to myself before I was going there, I said, I want to find out all the women. I think it was going to be around 10 women. I want to find out from as many women as I can what they're doing for spring break. And that helps me to be focused on them and not me. And I don't have to get myself into a triggering situation. I don't have to get myself into a circumstance where I feel like I'm going to become too outspoken. And I have a fill in the blank question. And I do that every time I go somewhere, or if I have someone come over. Oh, I'm going to make it my mission to ask them about this that's coming up. And then I want all of their answers. It helps me to kind of be, not at the same time, I'm being polite because I'm inquiring about them.
And you can even recover from saying something that you blurted out. Because we sometimes do. If you, let's say you are triggered by something, and you say something, you instantly think, oh no,
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. How do you recover from that? Well, one thing you can do is just say, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry.
Right,
You could
right.
do that.
Okay, so let's move on to number 2.
Okay.
Replace the rotten eggs of conversation with fresh ones.
And you can't, even if you've laid the rotten egg, you can recover from it.
What does that mean?
It means if you've said something like, someone says, oh, isn't this a cute pillow? And you say, that's terrible. I hate that. And you instantly think, what did I say? You can recover and say, now that I look at it, I can see what you can see in that. Even if you don't entirely, some things are for the relationship. And honestly, no pillow is so hideous that you have to say a thing like that.
I think the whole point of the rotten egg with the fresh egg, you can't bake a cake with rotten eggs, and you can't have good relationships with these horrible things that you're saying to people. And you may not mean to, you may not even recognize that you're saying them. Hopefully you do, but trying to keep things more positive by replacing. We always say this, the only way to get rid of a bad habit is to replace it with a good habit.
Right. You don't just eliminate one, you have to replace it.
Instead of saying like, oh, that idea is terrible, you could say something like, I could see where you're coming from, but I think that this might be a better approach. You're trading the rotten thing for the good thing. I think this is something that you just have to practice.
Well, even if you think you're 100% wrong, you may not be completely correct. And you can recognize in your own mind, you may think he's completely wrong. You can at least recognize, what if I'm making a mistake? You can't always be absolutely positive about a statement you're making or a decision or something you think you've learned. So you can say, would you consider this?
I think a lot of us alphas tend to genuinely believe that we are always right. And
you know what? Here's the thing. Then has it ever happened that you genuinely believed you were right and then you were proven wrong, and boy, is it embarrassing. So it'd be better psychology for yourself if you allowed, what if I'm wrong, and allowed so that you don't get totally embarrassed if you are wrong.
What helps me as an alpha is to say to myself, the relationship comes first. The other person's feelings are very important to me. And whether I'm right or not, doesn't matter. It's not about being right. It's about the relationship. And I want to foster and care for my relationship. So instead of saying, that's wrong, which we all, especially the alphas, we've all done it. You can very easily switch that and say, well, I see it a little differently. And that's okay. You can still share, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be like fake, right? That's what we're taught. That's the whole point of this. We don't want to be fake. And if you're somebody that's like, I know I'm right. I absolutely know I'm right. But remembering that, you know what? I really want this person that I'm with I want us to have a good relationship. So I see it differently. Have you ever considered this? And you're still speaking your mind and being true to yourself.
I think you hit on something that it just crossed my mind. When you say being fake, I think what we really are saying is if somebody is sugarcoating something, they don't actually see anything good in what you're saying, but they're trying to be, it comes across as condescending, and nobody likes that. We're not that good at actresses, I suppose. If you say you're fake, how do they know you're fake? They can feel it. So you can at least have and like you said, an authenticity to it. If you say, I see it a little different, that isn't saying your opinion is worth nothing.
Right.
Saying I see it differently, which gives respect to how they see it.
Exactly. The whole foundation from the Renaissance eras to now is about respect. The ultimate goal is respect, kindness, and with Fascinating Womanhood, we can drill it down and say it's about relationship building, because I think that's what everybody's missing when they're talking about politeness, is like relationship building. It builds relationships and it makes them healthy, and you have more healthy relationships if you can figure out how to do all this. Okay, what's number 3?
Number 3, get deep. None of this is effective if you don't care how others feel. That's what we were just saying. If you don't care, you actually have to care. If you really don't care how your mother-in-law feels about something you're doing, you're likely going to be fakey if you try to sugarcoat it, because you really don't care, and it'll come across.
You got to throw everything out if you can't do this one. If you really don't care and you're just learning politeness and manners and respect because you want something out of it, such as power and outcomes of some kind, where that starts to get into manipulation. If your ultimate goal are those things and not to foster and care and curate your relationships, it's never going to come out right. I hate to say it, but it's just not. And how do you do this? You're constantly thinking about others. I mean, this is where mature alphas come in. when you're a child and you don't care about other people, that's just part of growing up. And
Yeah. You want your brother's toy, and it doesn't matter that it's his. You just want it, So.
I mean, that's to be expected of a child. But if you're an adult woman watching this and you really want to improve, you have to get deep and realize, why am I doing this? And the people around me, what are their experiences? What do they see that I don't see? I think that's why it's called Get Deep. You got to really get deep into, why are you doing this and why does it matter?
It's actually kind of the crux of it. Do you care?
Do you
care? And I think a lot of us would find, yes, we actually do.
I agree.
A good relationship with this person.
I agree. I see this all the time online. Rude women. Oh
my gosh.
So rude. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that they're saying that. You're reading, you're scrolling through, and you're like, I cannot believe the comment section right now. But if you were to talk to those women face to face and be like, explain the situation, explain from how you see it, maybe not all of them, but hopefully most of them, I think they would realize, oh yeah, I didn't mean that. I wouldn't ever want to make somebody cry behind their computer. I was not intending to genuinely damage someone with the things I'm saying, but you are.
Yeah, especially with some people, and you brought up a good point, the people online, when people don't see you face to face, it's incredible how rude some people are willing to be. They'll call you a pig. They'll say, why don't you go jump off a cliff? And they've never seen you. They know nothing about you. And they're willing to do this because there's no accountability. They don't care about the relationship because they don't know you.
Well, they're not thinking about it. And that's what I love about this one, number 3, is this is about really digging down and saying, what are my words doing? And what are they doing to me? And what are they doing to others, more importantly? And caring enough about that will be a huge step in the right direction, because if you actually genuinely care about other people's feelings, you will change. Okay, then the 4th one is, what is your body saying? Now, if you're following, if you're following all your do's and don'ts, and you're replacing the bad eggs with good ones, and you're like caring about people, but then your body has all this body language that says, no way, get away from me.
and your eyebrows are going like this.
None of it's going to work. None of it will be effective.
And your tone can't be cold or fakey.
We did a video on tone because that is a huge topic. I can attach that to this. We did a video on that. You should watch that one. But anything, and we also did a video on body language, so you can watch that one as well. This is a big topic, but I think we just wanted to just quickly cover that. When you're talking to somebody and you're trying to be polite, but you're doing all the no-nos of body language, which is crossing your arms, rolling your eyes, what else? Frowning. I know I catch myself doing that all the time. I'm such an expressive person in general in my face. I have to watch it because sometimes I can, I can tell people things with my body, and I've had to learn this to really be careful about how I react, because if you're the person that's so used to these habits of looking kind of not very approachable, just be watchful. If you're somebody that's a little bit more quiet, or maybe you as an alpha or not is just trying to be more careful about what you say, and you're not saying much at all, your body language will say a lot for you.
Or even if you say something polite, if you're sarcastic, that's your tone. It's tone oh, thank you very much. When somebody is sincere.
Yeah, so I've seen this before. This happens a lot. Someone to my right gives someone to their right a compliment, and the other person over here is like, yeah, and you can tell that they're trying to agree, but it's not coming across that they agree. And it's like you said, it comes across as condescending, fake,
rude.
You gotta be really careful. Rude. And maybe we're just really extra sensitive too. I don't know. But I do think that this is needed, because there's an epidemic of rude women out there, especially online.
The internet does not help. Everybody you said things to, if you had to look them in the eye, how many things would you not say?
Well, and what's funny about body language, we're talking about body language, and was like, what does that have to do with the internet? Well, I've noticed that emojis are rude, which kind of is like internet body language.
Like the throw up one.
It's so rude. It's so rude. And sometimes I will use emojis online for body language, and in replace of body language, I might put a little heart or something, because I'm thinking to myself, I hope that they are reading this the way I intend. I think women in general tend to use them more. That's just my experience. I don't know, anybody watching, if you guys notice that women use them a little bit more than men. I use them a lot, especially with friends. I'll use like all kinds of them with words.
An emoji is also a way of signaling the end of a conversation without having to say, I got to go. You just put a smiley face and you kind of know the conversation's done for now.
And that's not an Emily post. That's just stuff to figure out socially. Okay, what's the last one?
This is really important. It's not last because it's least. Anyway, practice when to hold back. Did you really need to say that? Is it important? Not everything needs to be said in order for you to be authentic. That's really important. You don't need to say it. If you think, you have big feet, you don't need to say that, even if you can observe it. Develop the skill of knowing how to restrain yourself at the right times is important, especially if the comment doesn't matter and it might potentially hurt someone. So
it's like what we were talking about earlier. We're talking about being an adult. We're talking about being a mature woman. And this is like children. When I hear someone say, oh, I made somebody something and they spit it out or whatever. Like my daughter spit out salad the first time she tried to spit salad. Like that's what 5-year-olds do. And
and you expect it. Yeah.
It's to be expected. And I get it. It's part of them growing and they need to grow. We all need to grow and grow up. But what I'm seeing, and I think this is probably what you're talking about, is more often than not, I'm seeing a lot of adult women acting like children and not realizing it. And instead they're saying, I'm being true to myself. Well, really what you're telling me is that you never really grew up within that.
That's not being true to yourself. It's just being immature.
It's exactly. And you can't just use this excuse of, well, I'm being true to myself. I'm going to be honest and authentic. You can be honest and authentic without hurting people's feelings. My goodness. And
there's the other side of that coin. If somebody does it to you and they've taken a taste of something you've made and they spit it out, how do you respond to that back and not be immature yourself? A lot of us, and I'm one of them, I tend to freeze and not say anything. I just feel bad. And later I might cry or say something to my husband. But some women say that was incredibly rude. And then they have a big argument.
Right. And I guess I can, that's tough.
That is tough because you're hurt. You're wounded. You don't want to cry in front of someone who did that.
I think this is where you have to remember the same thing that we keep saying. What do you want to hurt their feelings back because they just hurt you? And then that becomes not polite. So if someone is beaten down on you and you want to defend yourself, which I totally get, because you don't want somebody wiping their boots on you, it's okay to tell them how you feel, but really try not to attack them, because attacking is the same thing they're basically doing to you. And you don't want to do that. It's just a tennis match. You want to be the bigger person and say, hey, I really don't appreciate you talking to me that way. But I think the main point of this here is to remember that editing your comments doesn't mean completely withholding your comments. And we did a video on, sorry for so many plugs on so many videos, but we did a video on self-restraint and how important that is in developing ladylike behavior. When you think of the most respected women that you can think of in your mind, you know that they have a filter. And when they're speaking, they will pick and choose what they're going to comment on. And some of that's going to be difficult comments and some of that isn't. But it's about saying, do I really need to say that? Is that really necessary? Am I going to hurt someone's feelings if I say that? Or type it?
You can preface, if you have to say something to someone that is kind of calling out something they're doing, you can preface it by saying, I really appreciate the situation you're in. This must be very hard for you. I can understand this and this and this, but it might be, have you considered it might be more helpful to look at this or that? So you validate them before you say, there's some things you could do that can make your life better. And so in other words, you're not just attacking them and making them feel worthless. And your compliments have to be sincere. You have to actually care that they're suffering, because people know. And frankly, maybe most of us aren't that good at actors. And so that's how we always know.
I think another thing you could do as an alpha, I know how hard this can be to restrain yourself. Sometimes you just blurt something out. If you're about to blurt something out or you have it in your head and it's coming, here it comes.
You feel it rising.
One thing that might help is to say, I hope I don't say that. I hope I say this the right way. Or I hope the thing I'm about to say is received positively, because I can't think of another way to say it. And then say it, and hopefully that'll help you to launch the comment in a better direction. And then they know that you might be feeling challenged with how to say what you're about to say, and it'll soften everything a little bit more.
Yes, that's good. That's a good example.
Okay, well, those are our 5 tips. What did we miss? Is there anything else that helps you out there with your politeness, your etiquette, your manners? Whether you're an alpha or a beta personality, doesn't really matter. We still want to hear from you. What has changed your life with etiquette? Are there any books you've read? Are there any movies you've seen that have really made an impact on how your ladylike behavior is and how polite you are? Are there any work experiences that you've had where you've learned that politeness has kind of steered things in the right direction? We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, or ways that you have diffused something.
Yeah.
Very, very creative ways of diffusing something or changing the subject that isn't so too abrupt.
Right. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't read Dixie's book, Fascinating Womanhood for the Timeless Woman, we will attach that book. You absolutely have to read it. It has everything in it about femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships, everything that our channel is about, as well as all the other books in our library. We have a Christian book, we have workbooks, we have a child's book, we have so many books.
A romantic journal.
We have so many books for you to check out. If you want to learn more about Fascinating Womanhood, there's so much to learn. We're also on social media. You have to join us on Facebook. We have a private group on Facebook where you can ask questions, get support from thousands and thousands of women that are like-minded. We're also on Instagram. All the places you can connect with us socially will be attached to the video.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Stay feminine.